In addition to being an excellent action game with presentational flair and gripping storytelling, Nier Automata is well known for its allusions to philosophy. This is made all the more apparent when considering the near endless list of excellent video essays on YouTube, diving into the game's real-world references and thematic inspirations. It's actually quite similar to Tetsuya Takahashi's Xeno series in that respect, whether we're talking about Gears, Saga, or Blade. On this channel, we even did a 9-part podcast series on the game, each episode averaging an hour and a half. Many people around the world have been deeply moved by Yoko Taro's vision of a bleak, post-apocalyptic world and what it says about how we in the real world continue to construct boundaries between ourselves, how our conflicts are rooted in the power of belief, and how those beliefs are being manipulated. However, what caught my attention in my latest playthrough of Nier Automata wasn't part of a mainline story beat or even an exploration of a main character. What struck me as profound came from a side quest, one easily missed and one that on its surface doesn't seem all that important in the scheme of things. After defeating Simone, the opera singer Goliath-class machine in the amusement park, the player emerges to see a small machine waiting for them, waving a white flag. Following it into the machine village, the player meets Pascal, the village leader whose pacifist ideology has come to be accepted by all who live there. Pascal's name, of course, is a reference to the real-world philosopher Blaise Pascal, and it is from one of his most famous works, Pensée, that Pascal wrote what are, in my opinion, 4 of his most profound ideas. Let's start with the first and most important. To make light of philosophy is to be a true philosopher. I'm sure all of us have encountered someone in our life who we felt, for lack of a better term, liked to sniff their own farts. A smug, condescending know-it-all whose self-importance made them both impossible to have an honest conversation with and who was so out of touch that their adherence to this higher philosophy or ideology made them difficult to relate to. I'm sure there are many who have watched my videos who have thought the same of me, and looking back on how I've gone about talking about things, I can't really blame them. That's why when 2B and 9S encounter Jean-Paul in the Machine Village, I felt immediately called out. Similar to Pascal, Jean-Paul's name was also chosen as a reference to a real-world philosopher, Jean-Paul Sartre. And while I don't think this character in Nier Automata is meant to represent Yoko Taro's thoughts on the real man, the character does stand in as an insert for what I believe Taro is trying to say about philosophy and ideology as a whole, particularly when it comes to those who follow these ideas with passion that borders on obsession. In the quest, Jean-Paul's Melancholy, the player locates Jean-Paul's fans throughout the world, all of whom are seeking his validation. Each of them tasks the player with delivering gifts to him. After doing so, Jean-Paul not only dismisses these acts of adoration, but insults them and refuses to give a proper response. Upon delivering this bad news to his biggest fans, they each, in turn, praise his rejection of them, declaring this as some higher wisdom or genius. It's baffling for us to see this kind of blind, cult-like mindset, and yet we see it all the time in the real world with many of our public figures. The tricky part is not in recognizing the gullibility of others who follow ideologies we disagree with, but in recognizing when we ourselves are trapped in such thinking. And one way to check ourselves on this is to look at those we admire and truly ask ourselves whether they seem to be taking themselves too seriously. Whether they believe they have it all right, that they're infallible, that they're smarter than everyone else, or that no level of criticism is ever acknowledged or accepted. Imagine, if you would, such a person in your mind, and then contrast them with Yoko Taro himself.
今回ニーヤオートマタを予約するとこの T シャツがついてきます。ちょっと待ってください。はい。ニーヤオートマタ T シャツ、ニーヤオートマタ T シャツ、ニーヤオートマタ T シャツ、ニーヤオートマタ T シャツ、スクエアネック。
Listen, it's clear after engaging with his work that Yoko Taro is a deep thinker who understands the philosophy he references. Yet, whenever the man makes a public appearance, he embodies Pascal's words. To make light of philosophy is to be a true philosopher. In a 2018 interview with Smash, he was quoted as saying, "I've never actually studied philosophy myself, but when I inspect humans, I get very interested by philosophers because as much as what they are saying sounds cool, deep inside I believe they're all insane, and that's what interests me. I put these books in the toilet so that every time I go to take a dump, I can read these books and feel like I'm connected with these philosophers." There could be no more literal embodiment of Pascal's idea than that. In other words, in order to honestly pull from philosophy those things that are most valuable, one must first engage with these concepts with the complete understanding that they are not infallible truths. There's no such thing in the realm of philosophy, and we mustn't take these ideas or ourselves too seriously. Rather, we should see these ideas as launching pads, the first steps we take on our own journey of inward self-reflection and personal growth. That growth comes from within our own minds and hearts, not from the outward figure from whom we're trying to gain wisdom. Despite what they believe about themselves, they are not the inventors of these ideas, but merely mouthpieces for the collected wisdom of countless generations that have come before. And that leads to the second and third ideas I found so profound in Pensée. When a natural discourse paints a passion or an effect, one feels within oneself the truth of what one reads, which was there before, although one did not know it. Hence, one is inclined to love him who makes us feel it, for he has not shown us his own riches, but ours. Certain authors, speaking of their works, say my book, my commentary, my history, etc. They resemble middle-class people who have a house of their own and always have my house on their tongue. They would do better to say our book, our commentary, our history, etc. Because there is in them usually more of other people's than their own. I believe this is a vital principle to understand, even more so for the philosopher than for those who follow. Sometimes, when a public figure begins to gain a following, it becomes easy to think that he or she created a movement, that their own genius is responsible for the fame, wealth, and adoration they now have. This ego then grows exponentially to the point where any naysayer or critic is not only unfair or unfounded, but stupid in the mind of this ever-enlarging ego and those who follow it. Again, the best cure for this disease of ego is to stop taking oneself so seriously. Allow yourself to feel foolish. Embrace that feeling. Live for it. It's what keeps your feet on the ground. Lastly, the fourth idea from Pensée that I wanted to share today. People are generally better persuaded by the reasons which they themselves discovered than by those which have come into the minds of others. The best teachers, mentors, coaches, and advisors I've ever had in my life all understood this principle. They weren't trying to impart their wisdom or knowledge onto me, but were determined to help their students, players, or whatever, to discover these things through their own curiosity, interest, and passion that they hadn't realized they had. What I see as being so wrong about the relationship we have with our public figures is that the dynamic is backward. It's you listening who is the hero, and the public figure who is the mentor on your hero's journey. Their job is to call you to adventure. It's your job to accept that call and do something great. And it's much easier to see one's role as a mentor clearly when you wear a giant silly mask on your face than when you use your own face as a symbol, as a brand, to convince the world that you are a hero to be followed. This is the most important thing Nier Automata taught me, even though I haven't learned it yet. I'm trying, and I made this video as something of a pledge to work harder at taking myself less seriously. And I'm sure it'll be a lifelong process for a person with my personality and temperament. In the meantime, please keep me honest in the comments section, and hopefully I'll one day obtain the kind of humility I wish I had.